allow anyone who wants to speak, any property owners or any interested parties, to be able to talk with the city council and to share their thoughts and feelings. And the intent is to just allot time for them to be able to say what they'd like to say. So I was going to divide it by the number of papers that I have here, basically 50 minutes or 55 minutes by the number of papers, and I have one. So Richard, I think you are up at. If you want to speak, please let us know. And Richard, why don't we think about 15 or 20 minutes? And does that sound okay?
We've got 10 minutes or so, and then we'll you address questions.
Just pop it in.
Okay, good job. Keep me going here, Josh.
Oh, that's HDMI. Sorry.
Okay, well, thank you for your time. We're working with the Crandall family on the property that they own that's south of 1600 South, and currently located in Spanish Fork, zoned agricultural, and under the general plan is agricultural. And so we have been asked, I guess we don't want to see this message again. I'm going to make that decision for you.
Hit the X. You
What was
just
this?
hit the X for that. Yeah, no would have been the better answer.
Okay, so we've got a little bit of data we put together to try to help frame the issues for our discussion and just try to see if we can make some sense of things. There's a couple of questions that were left outstanding last work session. The first was, what do the landowners want to see? I'm going kind of backwards here. The staff had left questions outstanding of what composition the council wants to see in the form of land use, right? So you've got a variety of different options, or what percentages do you want? And then I recall the mayor's question of what produces the highest and best tax base benefits for the city. So we're going to try to just address those a little bit and show you some of the things that we think are relevant here. The study area is a quarter mile each side of 1600, and I understand that 1600 is where the improvements are going in, but you have a substantial area in the city that's south of the south boundary of your study area, which we think is instrumental to the analysis, okay? So when we look at this, the north portion of this is, the north side of 1600 is substantially improved already. So if we say that, you know, there's not that many options for land use changes there, and we focus on the south, we have the 1,320 foot mark for the quarter mile, which is typically the appropriate spacing for signalization. And what we're showing you here in this diagram is 1200 West and Canyon Creek Corridor are designed to connect. Right now, the Canyon Creek Corridor is running 20,000 cars a day in front of Walmart, and very little, a few thousand cars a day in Springville City off 1600. As the freeway interchange comes in, 1600's improved, we're going to see a radical change to that. That's also, those improvements are going to afford the opportunity to reconfigure and redeploy this land for uses that historically have not been viable in the marketplace, right? So the Crandall property that we're working on is highlighted in green, constitutes about 32% of the overall area to the south. You've got 330 acres or so that's not in the planning area here, but we believe is important to be into the consideration for what represents your highest and best use of this area. So let me just highlight a couple things. When we look at that information generated by UDOT, they've got traffic counts on 1600 South about 16,000 in 2035, and then going to 24,000. We're working with Hales Engineering, who's done a lot of the work through the development south of this area in the Canyon Creek project, and done the work for Spanish Fork City. And when we look at part of the problem with the UDOT numbers is that they look at the general plans in the city and then they say, okay, what is there in the cards here for the forecast for the future for trip generation? And if you're general planned agricultural and zoned agricultural, you're not pushing the trips into the model that would normally be there depending on land use change, right? So we have underrepresented counts in that traffic. Where we think this is going to be is somewhere more in this 20,000 range once the freeway interchange opens. And then on Canyon Creek, we expect this to jump from the 6,000 to the 13,000 range prior to the development of any of the other properties adjacent to this. And again, as I said a moment ago, we're running about 20,000 cars a day in front of Walmart right now with the forecast to be moving up by a few thousand every year as we go forward. Now, the current understanding is that the 1600 South Corridor is going to be a UDOT developed road maintained by UDOT, which will then impose some access standards that are traditional for UDOT roads, and we're talking about 660-foot type access standards. So the commercial opportunities and the access here, particularly with the flyover landing somewhere in this area, are a little more limited. The property can best be utilized by accessing from the interior. We think that there's a strong connection that is being called for from 1200 West over to 51, which will animate the development opportunities and the tax base opportunities all through the interior. The other factors here have to do with travel speed. 40 miles an hour on 4 South, we'd expect this to be 40 to 45 miles an hour. You know, the faster the road, the less conducive it is to commerce. The travel speeds on these interior roads would be less and would be more appropriate for commerce activity. So as the interchange goes in, what we're anticipating is that in 2025, after the interchange is constructed, the average daily traffic counts here will be in the 55 to 60 range, both here and here. We're running about 110,000 cars a day is this forecast for 2025, and we'll run about 25 to 30 in this range. The Canyon Creek Corridor, 1200 West Corridor, will be somewhere in the 22 to 25,000 cars a day on both ends. Okay, now why this is important is because it's telling us that this is as viable a commercial corridor here as it is here. And you can all see what's happening in the Spanish Fork side down where the hospital is, Walmart, Lowe's, etc. So depending on what uses the city's motivated to entitle here, we can create similar types of development densities, tax base opportunities, and absorption on both ends of this corridor up to 1600 South. Okay, that's the essence of this. And then going to the question that the mayor left hanging about the tax base, if we look at office, we look at residential on a per acre basis, this is the type of numbers that you're generating in Springville City for tax per acre for 8,000 square foot lots. Retail has 2 tax elements to it. One is sales tax and one is property tax. But per acre, we're talking about something that's substantially 11 times higher volume that you can generate in the city if we go traditional retail. Office is the next best. Multifamily is similar. Industrial is very similar to the tax base that you're generating with your single-family residential on 8,000, 10,000 square foot lots. So this data is just pulled off the tax rolls, comparable projects in the county to the types of things that your precedent images in your planning documents for the 1600 South Corridor are showing. And so as you model through this, you pick the percentages of these uses you think works or what the market will absorb, and you can kind of select the type of economic benefits you want in your city.
Was that per month or per this? Is that
This is
projected?
annually on a per acre basis.
Oh, per acre. Okay, I missed. I was going to say
So-
it's got to be a lot more than that, but it's per acre.
Yeah, per acre, right. So
Okay, sorry. When you say let's see, it was traditional retail. So retail hasn't really changed over the last few years. Is this?
well, what I mean by traditional retail is it's single level, surface parking, and at grade retail, right? So when we start mixing,
Like your TJ Maxx and
more
everything
like
that's
the
already over
Canyon
there.
Creek project,
The Canyon
right?
Creek project.
If we mix this
Okay.
into multi-purpose buildings with retail street fronts and an office above, the mechanics of that change a little bit. But what this does is it provides you an opportunity to do two things. One, we can provide input and show you the data that we're collecting off other projects we've developed in Utah County primarily, that will show you where the fail points are on ability to absorb a certain amount of retail. I would tell you that you have at least 500,000 square feet of this type of retail opportunity here, and the land to building ratio for that is about 5 to 1. Okay, so that means that I need, 5 times 500,000 square feet for the land area, but that would be spread up and down that corridor and interfaced with other land uses, right? So the other thing that's happening today is we're seeing a much higher level of integration in the residential and the office and the mixing of these uses, which add effectiveness and viability and interesting design and vertical dimensions to these type of projects, so that you have consumers living in proximity, creating walkability, which is a big theme. And you can do it on different scales. You can do a real urban scale in Salt Lake City downtown, or University Malls kind of going that direction, the University Place, they call it now, our partners Woodbury Corp have been redeveloping. And you can also work this on a more traditional scale where you'll belly up higher density office or higher density residential against retail, not unlike, we'll look at some of your precedent images in a minute. And I think they make really attractive projects, but they support, the elements support each other and facilitate the success of those uses. So if the goal is to be able to keep your taxes down for the citizens of Springville, you want to raise your tax base through these commercial uses. So Spanish Fork, as an example, is a neighboring community, very similar in a lot of ways, is running the city element of your property tax 33% lower than Springville. They have a higher tax base as a result of the commercial activity they have in town. That's not to say that that's not something that's the direction you want to go. I'm just pointing out that it provides you options. And where we see this coming into play is if you have a high tax base, you have to go to highest and best use for the land development. That gives you the revenues, and then you can see how you go from there. In every case where we've developed from green fields with no infrastructure up, as in the case, many of you are familiar with the land where Canyon Creek Shopping Center exists before it was developed, not unlike the corridor on this end, no utilities, no roads, all kinds of issues that have to be overcome. In every case where we've developed those type of projects from that green field up, we've covered the cost of municipal infrastructure expansion and covered the cost of and produced additional revenues that can be exported for use for other purposes in the community, whether that be for amenities or holding your taxes down for single-family residential, but you create that tax base, which then gives you flexibility to provide services and amenities to the community. These images that you have in your planning document for precedent images, we think are appropriate and are examples of the types of things that you could expect to see that would produce those kind of results, so that you have some options and some flexibility here that will have economic benefits that will run for decades into the future. This particular example, which is the last page in the document that Josh had sent out, is a good example of an integration of a residential. This looks like a podium type product here, where the parking is integrated under the buildings with surface retail, where these residents participate in commerce activities through this area. It's easy to see how you could have, just off this side of the slide, a 4 or 5 story office building, 1 or 2, that would have street front presence and a combination of surface and structured parking.
Okay, so this is obviously different looking than the Canyon Creek project
Correct.
that you just did.
Correct.
So you're just trying to,
Well, Canyon Creek began in
look
2000.
different.
The north side was 2014 when it started. The south side was 2010-ish. Yeah, Costco. 6. It's been going a long time.
okay. Yes, so you've changed your philosophy is what I'm saying,
We
or no?
haven't necessarily
or
changed
not
our philosophy, but the markets have changed a little bit, and
Okay.
they've matured. So we're developing the Nexus, Kansas and Texas and Nebraska and different things. And these integrated functions are now becoming more in demand. People are more inclined to want to have the higher density residential platforms, not just a single half-acre lot, single-family residential unit. And as a result of that, it's a convenience format, right? So the gym's right there, the dentist is right there, the grocery store is right there, a lot more walkability. And there's various stages of that integration of walkability. In some cases, they're much more urban. In other cases, they're kind of a middle ground. And then in their lowest density form, they're much more suburban in form. But this kind of a model would be something that would take you to the tax-based numbers that I showed you a moment ago on that schedule.
Richard, how many people are needed to support that number that you showed us on retail, the retail thing? 20,000, I think, was your number, a little over 20,000.
We have that population in the marketplace today. You in Springville have residents leaking your sales dollars into your adjacent communities because you don't have those services available here.
Sure. So, how many people would you need to put in a development like this in order to support what you're talking about here?
Okay, well, I haven't calculated that based on like the number of doors, like in terms of how many residential units. But what I am prepared to tell you tonight is that the county is growing at an unprecedented rate. We see
Sure.
no end to the growth. We see an extraordinarily high demand. We just opened up 142 units of apartments in American Fork. That project is a 2002 beginning, 2010 ending vintage with Home Depot, Walmart, not terribly dissimilar to what we're doing in Canyon Creek. And we did what we did at Canyon Creek because that's what the city wanted. They wanted the maximum sales dollars from the traditional retail format they could get. So you're talking Costco's and Walmart's and Lowe's and TJ Maxx and Home Depot's and those kind of things, right? So the project is exceeding sales projections. Every retailer that opened comes in, and what happened there is people have a model. The market research departments have models that they use for the forecast of the store based on their other experience with all their stores countrywide, right? And in 2008, when the recession hit, people were forecasting growth in markets like Las Vegas, where they were rolling those numbers into their store sales forecast, but it was dependent on multiple years of sustained compounded growth of residential in close proximity to that location. Of course, housing stopped, the growth didn't come, and all the models collapsed. So what happened is during that recession, the market research departments got beat up and have become ultra conservative, and they only are counting the bodies they've got like in a 5-mile radius. Now we'd try to sell the Canyon Creek project to national retailers, and they'd say, well, I'd say you've got X number of people. And they say, no, we don't. We only have 70% of X. And I said, no, you got to realize that Ely, Nevada doesn't have anywhere else to go other than the Wasatch Front. Or Green River, Utah doesn't have anywhere to go other than the Wasatch Front. Or go down all the way down to I-70. They all come up. And at some point, they go to St. George. But these guys wouldn't give you credit for these extended market areas until they opened the stores. The average that they exceeded their sales forecast by was about 20% for all my national retailers there. And what I'm telling you is you have that same capacity in Springville. The corridor, the Canyon Creek 1200 West corridor, will have that commerce-oriented speed, commerce-oriented access spacing, and will have the ability to be successful at some number of retail. Now, right now, we don't have another national tenant that's 100,000 square feet ready to go into the marketplace, but the next one that comes along, there isn't another place in proximity to the Spanish Fork Springville market for them. This would be the corridor once the freeway interchange is in place and the zoning's in place so that they can see a path to the end. They've got to see that general plan, that zoning is there, the city's embracing that concept, and then we can put those kind of deals together. So if we get a few good national tenants as key anchors, then we can drive this kind of a format off the periphery of those areas. This particular drawing doesn't have a 100,000 square foot tenant or even a 50,000 square foot tenant. Hobby Lobby is a 50,000 square foot tenant. Walmart's a 120,000 square foot tenant. Lowe's is a 120,000 square foot. I'm looking at Joe because he should help me with this math. But there will be those players, and they will come along, and this would be the place they'd go. And we can drop them into an architecturally complementary format for your city, and that helps optimize your tax base. It will make it work better if you have the residential and office and retail all integrated in design up and down the corridor and make this a real destination. And then you're creating this urban core parallel to the freeway that will work in concert and complement with your traditional Main Street. And your Main Street can be preserved, and you'll have tax dollars that you're generating to be able to invest in other parts of your city for public art, recreational venues, those type of things. But you've got to get those numbers up to the point that you generate that cash. If you go all residential, you know, our experience has been it kind of covers its cost, but there's nothing left over. And you just don't end up with the same flexibility and opportunities to serve the community that you would otherwise. So our thoughts are that we're prepared to help bring data to the table, make suggestions, come up with plans that are in the theme of your precedent images. I know you haven't necessarily adopted these and said that's what it is, but what we were trying to do tonight is tell you that we are here to try to go the direction that the city wants to go, that if tax base is what you're interested in, it's mathematic formula. You can't say, I want a lot of tax base, but I want all single-family residential. And you can't say that you want your citizens, you want tax base and have all your citizens doing their primary consumption for goods and services outside your community. It's an opportunity you have to do this, and it will be the north-south corridor that will be the most dominant portion of that, with the east-west corridor feeding it. So that's what we're hoping to present today, and then we're happy to participate in whatever process you outline for how we go forward and try to bring this into higher levels of validation and higher levels of analysis, then come back with specific proposals that relates to it. But I do want to emphasize that we believe that this corridor here is as important as this corridor here, and they all work because this is now happening. You got the $100 million going in here for 1600 South and the freeway, which now puts this on the map. Our belief is, and in talking with the traffic engineers, that over time, you've got an issue of jumping up here to 89, but over time, these will go 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, right? And that the traffic down here is handicapped a little bit from a commerce standpoint. About 15,000 of those trips go up the canyon. And, you know, you might stop at Chick-fil-A on your way to go down to Lake Powell or something and, you know, fill up the car with gas, but you're going through the community. And so these other corridors, particularly the 1600 South corridor, is all local traffic. And you'll have an opportunity to keep those people in your community, engage in the consumptions of goods and services, and really do some things that bring to your community the things that your citizens are already engaged in consuming.
Richard, can you explain to me the importance of this road that goes from Highway 51 over to the Canyon Creek Road, and what it's, you mentioned that it was significant, it's important. Can you explain that again? Maybe I missed it before.
Let me see if I can zoom in here. Okay, so what happens is you're going to have a flyover that's going to go here. If it's the same distance as the flyover on 4 South, it lands right here.
Mm-hmm.
That means nobody has access to the south side of the road until after the flyover lands. Don't have access to the north side of the road until the flyover lands. So you land, and immediately you're hitting the signal here where the railroad tracks go out, right? Now, if I'm going, this is 1,320 feet. If I'm going every 660 feet before I have access, you know, you're going to have one here, and then you're going to have another one here. Well, now you're right in the middle of, I want to call it LKQ. I'm not sure.
That's right.
Arizona Autos
Yep.
property, right? But you're not going to get the access into this interior that you want. But you've got this large area of your city that ought to be fundamental to the planning process, in our estimation, and represents a significant number of acres. There's some wetlands issues in here, but every project in Utah Valley that we've tackled, barring Saratoga Springs, which is up a little higher, but everything in the bottom has had significant wetlands issues. And so this is something that has to be studied, but can be managed, can be consolidated, can be relocated. But what you're trying to do is say, how do I get the aggregate of these numbers in play from a tax-based standpoint, not just 1,320 feet, right? This is double 1,320 feet to this area. And what that means is you've got a signal here, and this comes out to 51. And as Spanish Fork is successful in getting over the railroad tracks, you're going to have slant road come down, jump the tracks. Now, do you want them to go right or left? If they go right, they can go back into Springville here. If they go left, they're going right into down Spanish Fork Parkway into IHC and Canyon Creek Boulevard. So they're gonna engage in commerce probably where it's the easiest place to get to. This opens up the development here that has been kind of orphaned in the past because of lack of utilities from Spanish Fork comes up here and has services. Springville hasn't got down to this point with services. This opens up a lot of ground that has a really potentially high opportunity for premium development for your city, that this area will be potentially unique in terms of its form and character of that development in relationship with a lot of the areas that are already developed. So that's why I think this is important. You need more than one, what we might call a collector class. We have minor collectors and major collectors, corridors here to be able to circulate that traffic. But what's not drawn on here is Spanish Fork Parkway comes up like this. If this comes up, we've got great circulation here, plus 1600 going all the way up, and obviously all the way up to 4th South here. So you've created that master grid now, which really provides people access from all different directions. And if you believe that you have leakage of your sales tax dollars to your neighboring communities, you're creating an opportunity to reverse that and bring them back in. But if they have to come off the bench and down here before they can go up there, it's going to limit the number of trips you're going to generate to a commerce center in this location. We view this as the primary intersection. This is certainly a critical intersection, but it's more of a jumping off point to get into the commerce center than it would be the commerce center itself, because you don't have any commerce on the north side of the road. This is a four-corner virgin intersection that will be designed to produce the optimal amount of synergy and gravity for commerce and development of the design and choice that you make.
Okay, I'm sensitive to others who have just walked in. If you want to speak, you need to come up and fill out a paper. Richard's been good enough to kind of inform us, and if no one else does, then we'll ask some more questions of Richard. If not, if those who want to address the city council in regard to this, you're more than welcome to come up. And Kim, do you have the, oh, they're in the lobby, okay. But
Can I ask a question? Are you at that point? Matt,
I've been asking
Mayor?
a question.
yeah, please,
Kind
yeah.
of- If you go back to that overlay that you have, I know that your study is primarily the Crandall property, but this is just an observation with
That one?
yes, that one right there is great. Where you have the new road that you're talking about through the Virgin Crandall property.
Yep.
And I know you're not proposing anything to the west of that, but it would really seem to me to be ideal if and you've probably already seen this and thought, if that continues around and loops on the west side of the hospital. And because I believe that's a track that's scheduled to be closed, and that would really tie it all together.
Well, I wish I had a pen. Do I have a pen here, Josh? I mean, on the, no, okay. The UTA line is going to come down like this and cut over to this track here. So you've got this connection between the Sharp and the Tinnock line that's going to occur. Okay? We've had conversations with your staff, we've had conversations with Spanish Fork City. There has to be a significant amount of will to cross those lines, and there's costs with that.
Yeah.
So there's probably some barriers here which are going to limit the development to the west. Okay, this road probably will come through like this and hook back in, to your point, and go down to the hospital area, but we're creating a relatively low volume kind of circulating route that's now coming back to the old Chapel Lane and then back up to Canyon Creek, because the hospital's kind of pushed off to that side. You know, the roads go around it, but there's nothing else north and there's nothing else west of it, right? So this is not saying there isn't other roads. We're saying that these are the key road connections. Canyon Creek Parkway, 1200 West, is now being designed or is committed. It's on the MAG priority planning documents. So this is underway. The Crandalls are very collaborative and willing to look at exactly how this works and try to make this happen early in the process is the discussions that's been had. It's important to follow the power line easements where possible so that you don't burn more land than you need. You can put a road under a power line, you can't put anything else under a power line, right? Parking lots. And then you got to tie back in here. The only reason this road, Canyon Creek, goes like it does, this very circuitous route, is because at the time we built the road, we needed it to be in Spanish Fork City, so we just had complete control over the process, right?
Plus you had to cross the railroad.
Yeah, and we got one railroad crossing here, right? And so, you know, it was the option that was viable at the time, and it was always viewed as a temporary connection. It's always anticipated that this will come up and then come back into here at a 90-degree angle, this being the primary corridor and this being a local road. So that's the history and the vision for how that works in the future. This will start coming together, but it has the rail here, which will be the UTA line for the front runner, and then you've got Union Pacific running here, neither of which have a crossing at this point. So unknown how you will develop that direction, right? But what we do know is this works, and we now have hit a level where we have average daily traffic counts that are viable and are sustainable. They'll grow over time to support the type of commerce that we're talking about.
So Richard, let me ask you a question, then I'll let Calvin, I think he's on your team, so he
Yeah,
wanted to say a few
Calvin's
words.
the team leader.
So in relationship to how much, maybe this is an unfair question, but of the properties that go farther to the east along 1600 south, how do you control those? Are you controlling those? Have you had
here?
conversations? Yeah, through that.
Well, a lot of it's you.
Right, well, sure, but I mean, the ones that's not us.
Yeah, so you got city in here, and then you got the wrecking yard, right?
Right,
And then you got the bus terminal.
right.
So I don't know that this is prime development ground in the near future. I think that this is probably pretty set in terms of its land use for a period of time. So that's why when we study the 1,350 feet off 1,600, you've got a window here that's really significant and good. But you just have a lot of this stuff that's going to have to wait for market values to increase to the point that the landowners are prepared to repurpose that land with higher intensity development. And that's not necessarily imminent at this point.
No, but you're gonna wanna some way are you not gonna wanna make sure that the zoning and the look, if you will, along 1600 south on the north is the same as the south, is the same as on the,
Yeah, this is already moving in certain directions, so the planning control structure isn't necessarily in place that you might end up with, but you'll do what you can. This is all done. You're done from about here up, right, temporarily, and then this will change over time, right? But this is all virgin, as is this corridor through here. So this gets to be your A choice, this gets to be your A choice, and that starts to expand the ability to repurpose the land on 51, but improving that interior as you go. And then we would work with the city on the wetlands issues on a lot of your ground and see what we can do to create park environments, consolidate the riparian elements, you know, manage the streams to flow where you want them to go. In the Canyon Creek project, Canyon Creek because it's got all these water sources that were coming off the hill that the Army Corps sort of jurisdiction on because it was groundwater coming up, getting the irrigation ditches. Now they say it's perpetual streams. And so there are, you know, they're not in final form, but as they get finished, they will become walking pathways in conjunction with the riparian elements that tie to trail systems, and that's the concept. We think that there's a lot of those kind of amenities that can be created through here that would be assets to your community, and then get the right kind of development around them to complement it. This is your primary corridor. That will work for distance. And then it also, if the traffic increases on 51, I mean, right now it's running about 9,000 cars a day, but you start driving up 1600 here, and you're going to find people turning off and doing different things. You're going to see a major shift in your traffic patterns, pulling off US 6, off 4 South, and then dispersing it through this center section, because this is actually a faster, more direct route. And I know it's circuitous to get from 51 up here past 89, but it can be done. And you're getting a lot of pressure there, which will accelerate the need for the connections. And the railroad will, there's money allocated through this last legislature. I want the $40 million to start the process of the track consolidation.
Yeah,
I mean,
kinda, yeah.
yeah,
But the answer to your question is yes, they're certainly trying to get rid of that western track.
but that'll happen.
Right,
You know, that's part of the planning process.
that is,
This goes now, sets those themes, and then it communicates with those adjacent properties to get them to those places that are going to make your community the best it can be.
right.
I really like your secondary east-west corridor. I think that's a great idea that really solves some of the issues we're having with 1600, where it jumps into, right there at the T-bone,
Right at the T-bone,
miners, and
yeah.
that. Because that's going to be a crap show once this happens, and that's where this UDOT says, "See ya, we're done." So I appreciate that idea. I think that really helps get the traffic through, yet also creates the road trip.
Yeah, no,
So
we
I think it's-
recognize a lot of what we're talking about, well, actually, everything we're talking about from this point down
Yeah.
is outside the study. I also recognize that the UDOT numbers here are forecasting 6,000 cars a day after the freeway interchange is in. I'm just telling you that it's flawed base analysis. I can't be doing 20,000 at the other end of this street, have a freeway interchange go in and be at six.
And
You know what I mean?
I think we all know.
Yeah, so if as we broaden the view, and that's what our hope is tonight, that we can help do, is to broaden the perspective. So I understand that there needs to be limits on the planning effort that's being made. But if I was drawing this buff-colored planning area, I would run that down to the edge of your city here, a strong emphasis here with a focus here, and be thinking through how all of this becomes viable. So we end up with, what do these add up to? You're the accountant, Dan, tell me what this is, 2.5. Well, this is the gross area, so I've got, 600, 500 acres, 600 acres here of essentially unplanned area, because Crandall property has been left in agricultural, there's just no vision for it. Now, I understand that also means there's no planned infrastructure, et cetera. And again, I just want to reiterate that we've done multi-hundred acre developments in Utah County, in the valley floor, and in every case, it had no infrastructure. Projects have been able to cover the cost and export money to the city to use for other things in each case, as long as we go to the highest and best use that the market will support.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much.
Anything else?
No, but yes, Josh?
I just wanted to jump up quickly for the benefit of the other property owners and the council. This whole area is in the study area. This buff-colored area was just the area that we were running math on to come up with scenario ideas to give us a talking point. But the same level of detail and deliverables will be given for this whole area to the southern boundary of the city through the planning process.
Does it also go north up into that?
No, it really stops.
Not there, but up into the,
Where your hand is now.
yeah, where the
Yeah, right
hand
up in
is.
there.
No, it really comes up to about this line here. But if, depending on how the property owners work together in this area, we may let that process proceed and not expend as much effort there.
I would think that the whole
Uh,
thought process ought to be all the way through.
But
there.
it's definitely we're looking at all of it, and those deliverables will apply to the whole area. So this is all part of the
Okay, that's good to know.
process.
Okay, Mr. Crandall? Do you want to introduce yourself? No.
Easy with the Mr. Crandall. He passed away a number of years ago. I'm just Calvin, so anyway, appreciate the opportunity to be here. And by the way, my email said 5:30 for the meeting, not 5. Whatever. Maybe I don't know how to read. Maybe I should pull my glasses on.
We're glad
Quick-
you're here.
What's going on?
Quick question. This is your study area here. What's going on here? Should this be part of the study area as well? Part of it's outside the city, Spanish Fork, but is there a coordinated effort between the two cities to make something happen? Yeah, it's like Richard said, you've got a flyover crossing the railroad here, and so you're somewhat eliminated, but wouldn't it make sense if you're going to master plan everything to include this as well?
Josh?
I thought.
It is, isn't it, John?
It's all
It is.
So it's part of the process.
Everything within the boundaries.
Okay.
The reason that's drawn like that, though, Calvin, is because that's current city boundaries.
Right.
But that's definitely.
I'm going to say it should be maybe some light hatch so that you're going to look at it as part of the overall plan, even though part of it's outside. This is, I guess, part of it in here is in the city. Actually, the city owns it, but it's not in the city. There we go.
But it's also part of the study area.
Right. So if it's part of the
And
study,
a key
okay.
part, because that's where that first flyover lands.
Exactly. Yeah, it lands there. So, it's all, don't master plan everything and leave a little eyesore right there, leave an island, include it. And with that, yeah, I do have a lot to say, but I'm afraid it would be much ado about nothing. So with that, I'm going to yield the rest of my time to Mr. Mendenhall to finish answering any other questions you have. So
Well, I
with
think-
that,
And if you both want to stand up and we can ask either of your questions. So, questions from the council?
okay.
Yeah, that's great. Is this gonna ask?
So, this is an assumption, but
know what?
this east-west
He's
road,
multi-talented.
yeah, this east-west road,
Yeah.
that gets paid for mostly by the developer at some point, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's
yeah.
the beauty of that road, is, I mean, as a city, we like it when somebody else does it, whether it's UDOT or a developer,
With development.
Yeah.
And, you know, there may be some pioneering agreements, and it's important.
right?
project.
Yeah, that hopefully we get our money out of
Yeah,
sometime.
well, this road here is 30 feet
Mm-hmm.
as a ribbon road with no utilities, and so all the utilities are gonna go into the sides when it expands to its ultimate width, you know, which is probably in the 70-odd foot range, right? And so a lot of that has to do with, what you want for the land use determines what size the road needs to be, because whether it's a minor or a major collector road is a function of how intense the development is in the vicinity and how much traffic it's gonna carry, right? But, you know, those things will sort themselves out as we go.
So can I ask a question? You talk about this access road. It hits 51, then what? Does it go farther east?
I'm assuming, I mean, it could, but I think you've got problems of getting over the tracks and through the houses and all of that.
Because down below on, and I don't know the names of the roads, but Spanish Fork has the proposed is to go over the tracks, I
Spanish Fork
assume,
comes
up into
up here.
Spanish, up into Mapleton?
Yeah, this is Spanish Fork Parkway, and it's to this point, and it's down to this point, and they're just working on the cross-trackings. I was told today by staff at Spanish Fork City that they've got that basically done, and they expect it to be in place. Did he tell us 23, Joe? Spring of 23, but it's gonna be
My
a gate.
kids live in Legacy Farms, and
It's gonna
I
be a
guess
gated
it's
crossing.
big news.
So
It's big.
you'll have a couple trains a day where you're gonna have the gates down and it's not gonna flow. It's not a grade separated access, right? So this, you know, slant road comes down here, something like this, and then this goes up past the high school. So there's a lot of traffic that's priority would be to funnel down to this location. And then, you know, our thought is that when it hits here, you wanna provide people convenient access directly here and a secondary access this way.
We've worked with Mapleton too, actually fairly unsuccessfully, to have proper connectivity there through the rails, and wanted to work with them on that. And as they did some of the development there, on the south end of our city, they didn't want to play ball very much there.
Sunrise Ridge. but-
Yeah. We actually have a public crossing that could potentially be used there, but
So the strip of ground, the long, narrow strip, that's going to be Springville?
it's in our annexation declaration boundary.
And once once the railroad goes away, then,
Yeah, and it depends on the solution there. Remember, the original solution would cut that property up pretty significantly with the rail going between the two. The latest plans and designs have the rail hugging the easternmost lines, which would leave that property more developable. So,
You're saying kinda like this, Troy?
yeah, I mean, I think the latest Spanish Fork designs have the double tracking going completely on the east side all the way up to where they join.
This all comes out.
in
Correct.
Springville.
Yeah. Some of the early designs had the one track connecting to the other track, similar to the Tintic Sharp connection. So it really just depends on design and how that all happens. But that kind of narrow sliver is in the annexation declaration boundary.
Can I ask a question to that? Does
Sure.
that mean from,
Your house.
yes, I was trying to think how far west. Center Street, 4 South. 4 South is where they split. You're saying they're gonna, the potential to stay together on the east line.
Yeah, I think closer
in the
to
same
7th
alignment.
South, but
Yeah, somewhere along in there, they would just put a double track in one, and then the eastbound, as we grew up with it, eastbound, westbound, but the west side of that track would all go away, clear up through and including Spanish Fork, which is what they wanted.
Right, that's
to
the
begin with.
working concept.
That's
right
the
now.
working concept today.
And that's where the 40,000 was kind of, I won't use the word seed money, 40 million, excuse me.
Yeah.
Yeah, 40 million, sorry.
Was
Yeah, yeah, among friends.
okay. I can say because UDOT wanted just the opposite. They wanted the upper track to go away.
Yeah, that's better for their crossings.
It's better for their crossing on Main Street and Highway 89 because you're pretty short, close distance there.
Right.
But now they're saying, no, let's put them both on the east side and run 2 parallel.
Yeah, and the engineers are just barely starting to look at it.
They're just starting to look at it to figure out what.
Well, and you need to understand, and this is getting a little bit more afield, is the 40 million is not the completed project. It's,
That's just to pay the railroad to come to the table, and then construction's on top of
One
it.
version,
I think you said it right.
completed on
Unfortunately,
one.
I think there's a lot to that.
Yeah.
yeah, I think the original engineer's estimate was below 40, but when the railroad saw it, they thought it might be 60, or maybe 70.
80, I heard 80.
Or 80.
Exactly.
So, okay.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that I heard that right. Okay, thank you.
Right, anything else?
Other questions for Richard?
Well, we appreciate it. Thank you for the time to be able to discuss this. We're looking forward to working with staff to try to get into the details of what we think might be best. But we're prepared to spend money and time with professional consultants to produce imagery and concepts that will flesh up some of these ideas, as long as we can get a sense of the direction that seems like it makes sense to the council.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to do this. It was an advantage when no one else showed up, so it gave you a chance to spend some more time, more in depth.
Yeah, we spent more than our 10 minutes.
You did, and it's okay. I think it was very helpful for us, so thank you for doing that. Okay. Okay, anything else that we need to go through? Liz?
Well, I was just going to ask, and maybe I missed it on the parks, the bicycle parks, if there was like maybe I missed, I was gonna say, it's not maybe a site plan or a cost plan. Did we probably receive that, and I didn't notice that, of how much they are going to be?
No, you didn't miss anything. I mean, the process is, we've budgeted for a project, Buildings and Grounds Department, and this is on the Charrington Bike Park area. The Buildings and Grounds Department has gone out for a consultant and a contractor to create that. And that's really the next step. The next step would then be to incur some dollars to come up with a final site plan, work with the neighbors and the biking community to create that, and a price for that. And so that's the next step. We just want to make sure the council was comfortable. We're going to actually start incurring design costs associated with it.
Okay, and then also, it seems like there was a bike park added to the pickleball courts that are down by the CRC, or did I not read that correctly?
No, you read that correctly. That's another concept. In the budget, there was just over $100,000 allocated towards a children's bike structure. The location of that was not determined, and the suggested location right now is the empty, roughly half acre to an acre, would be south of the pickleball courts at the CRC location.
Okay,
Troy, I don't know if everybody has seen those plans from the contractor. that
Yeah,
was
probably not, because they were submission concepts that would then be developed. We can certainly share them, but with the knowledge that they're just
Yeah,
some
they might
ideas.
change, but it might be
Yeah.
good for the rest of council to see that, because it is pretty impressive.
Yep, we'd happy to share those.
okay, and then did we get the parks general plan back?
No, you haven't received it back. It was originally scheduled for, I want to say, April 1st to come to the council, but I think the the consultant had a conflict, so I think that'll be about the middle of April. You'll see that at the council meeting for adoption.
But there is kind of a tentative end plan that they've got.
But yeah, we have drafts back at the staff level, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, I would just give
Thank
us
you.
as much lead time as we can to read through it, because it's probably pretty comprehensive, so,
It is. Yeah,
I'll make a note of that too, because we,
64 pages.
yeah.
right, I mean, it's basically in the format that we're ready to bring it to council, so it's something we could share right away anyway.
If you wouldn't mind
As soon
doing
as we
that,
get a
that'd be
final
great.
draft, yeah.
Liz, you okay with that?
yes, so that we'll have time to look it over, and it will be in paper form.
And Liz, so that you do know, in
Thank
the
you.
Parks and Rec meeting, we did get the chance with that committee to look at the concept plans of the bike park.
Okay,
So it's been, at least that new committee has had a good chance to look at it and have some feelings towards it to share back with staff.
Oh, thank you. I totally appreciate that.
The general consensus on that plan.
Knowing that.
With the contractor that was accepted, there were two main contractors that put in toward the RFP, and the one that was accepted almost unanimously, the S&L was the one that was chosen. And so, and like Chris says, we had a discussion in the Parks and Rec meeting, and everybody in the Parks and Rec meeting agreed with staff and everybody else that's seen both of those plans, so.
So, the Parks and Recs, are neighbors on that committee as well? Neighbors to the,
No, it's just, the
Bike park?
neighbors have been consistently at the meetings.
okay,
They're not part of the board, but they have consistently been at the meeting, so they're well aware of what's going on.
So the nice part about the
Okay.
submission, I think one of the positives that staff liked on the selected submission is, well, they have some great concepts right now. What they want to do is actually set up a website, open some comment period, get neighborhood and bike community feedback about what their concerns are and their issues, then go actually design the park to meet those concerns, and have some public engagement on that. And then also tie that in with both the community and council's desire for kind of budget targets and where you want to kind of spend your dollars on amenities. So it's a much more cooperative process than simply design and then hand it and say, this is what you're going to get kind of thing, which we really liked given the location and the concerns about the neighborhood.
And Liz, even at this point, some of the past comments of the neighbors have been incorporated into the concept plan of a berm, trees, off-street
oh,
parking.
yes, and I have seen that.
So that, so
somewhere, so I
they're,
appreciate that.
the neighborhood's being taken into consideration quite a bit to this point, but they're not done having their opportunity.
And what is the time frame on that? From, the conceptual plan, and then the meeting, public meetings, and then kind of the final plan, and then,
So they are actually had a proposed schedule that would allow the entire park to be completed by the end of the year. That's probably and almost certainly not realistic given the tank construction, not anything they're doing. And they're well aware of that. There are actually already the engineering teams have been talking back and forth so we can maximize the actual work that's happening, so that if certain different dirt work happens, we're not double paying for that. And then also Public Works has been great to work with in terms of making sure we can utilize even, for example, the top of the tank and other things in the design. So there's a lot of good coordination happening with this project already.
okay, thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
it's 5-2, so I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, those opposed? Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Okay, Genevieve, it's all yours.
All right,
What do you know?
so,